Welcome back like we never left. I am so glad to be here to break down part two of Nature's Help Meet. Today, I would like for you all to start off by taking a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth and reflecting on the great things that have happened to you since you've wakened up today. Woke up, awakened. Think about three positive things that you are grateful for and put them in the chat box now. Type. I hope that you're typing now because now I am going to begin the lesson. Boom, boom. All right. So now that we are awakened, we are grateful, we have shared our gratefulness in the comment section, let's talk about fertilization. So, before we talk about fertilization, we are going to dig into the different parts of a flower because we need to remember the functions and the different parts so that we are able to correctly identify what is happening during fertilization in different parts of the flower and how they all play a part with each other. So we have the stamen, which is the male part of the flower, and we have the pistil or the carpel, which is the female part of the flower. The male part of the flower has the filament and the anther. The female part has the stigma, the style, and the ovary. So let us dig into what exactly the function of these beautiful parts of the flower are. Let me take off these annotations. All right. So I'm going to add some more though. So the stamen, again, the left part of the flower or the left side of the screen that we had circled, it has the anther, which is where pollen is produced. Boom. Pollen is produced in the anther, and the filament supports the anther where the pollen develops. All right? Anther, pollen, filament, support. Then we have the pistil or the carpel, the female organs of the flower, which has the stigma, the style, and the ovary. The head of the pistil receives pollen. So from the anther, supported by the filament, to the stigma, which will begin what we're talking about today, fertilization. So, the style. Now, the style is the stalk of the pistil, which connects the ovary to the stigma. And the ovary is where the beautiful seeds go to live. And I'm not underlining really great. They go to live here and then mature into fruit. So let's look at that. Let's go back and let's look at that. Oh, let me get rid of all the annotations. Getting rid of all these annotations. Okay. Male part of the flower. Anther, filament, female part. Ovary, stigma, style. Beautiful. All right, let's go. Let's go. Ready? Next part. Definitions, check. So, what is fertilization? What exactly is this? To fertilize. Well, fertilization in flowering plants, because fertilization also happens with humans. Humans and flowers are very similar. Humans and plants are very similar. They both have to be fertilized in order to reproduce. So, fertilization in flowering plants happens through a process called pollination. We've talked about pollination last week and our friends, the pollinators, which take the pollen grain that is brought from the male part, right? From the anther, correct? Supported by the filament. And that they take it and it lands on the stigma. Fertilization happens when one of the male cells combine with the egg inside of the flower in the ovary. After fertilization, each ovule within the ovary creates a seed. The pollen that is brought from the anther, this is a recap in different words to make it more simple and more tangible. The pollen germinates on the stigma, creating a tube known as the pollen tube. We know the pollen tube. And the pollen tube grows down into the style, the female part of the flower, and reaches the ovary. And finally, it enters into the ovule within the ovary through a minute pore where the male gamete fuses with the egg. So let's look at that. Boom. So pollen being produced from the anther, correct? Being supported by the filament. Let me get my annotation on. The style, right? Here's the style. Here's the style. But then within the style is the pollen tube, right? It goes down, it goes down, it goes down, it goes down, and then boop, boop, boop. Here's the ovule, the embryo sac. This is where life grows and develops. Take your time, look at that. I think it's really beautiful. This is fertilization. This is how life, the cycle of life continues. All right. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, since we're talking about the cycle of life, I wanted to reiterate or restate the goal of every living thing on this planet, including plants, is to create offspring for the next generation or to create new life for the lives to come. And one of the ways that plants and humans produce offspring is by making the seeds. So, I mean, yeah, Miss Breeze, I know that, circle of life, yada, yada, yada. But why is fertilization even important? Like, why is fertilization important? Well, plant fertilization brings forth new life. And without new life, then there is no new life. Simple. The fertilized egg goes on to form a seed. And you know about GMOs, but if something has a seed in it, it's a fruit. And also, if something has a seed in it, it's real. So, well, I mean, it's real. And then they have the fruits and vegetables, or the fruits that are hybrided or modified a little bit. So, the egg goes on to create a seed, which has the food and will later grow into a plant. So, plant fertilization is important because it brings forth life. All right? The egg that is fertilized down the pollen tube through to the ovary goes to form a seed, which contains food. And that baby, or that that plant baby, will grow into a new plant. And that is fertilization. Fertilization brings forth new life. So here's a different photo of this process. So, get my annotation again. Turns to seed. Boom. Ovary. Ovule. Turns into fruit. Embryo. Baby. The seed is the baby. And that's right here. Within the ovary. Turns into a seed. Turns into a fruit. Super simple, but super beautiful. Super beautiful. Now, we've seen the fertilization process within the flower. Now let's look at it connected to the process of pollination. So we have our pollinator. Oh, that was terrible. Our pollinator pollinating the flower. Then our pollinator puts the pollen on the stigma. It goes down the pollen tube, connects to the beautiful, beautiful ovary, and creates a seed. And that seed opens up and becomes a fruit, a new plant, and the seeds go back out into the world. We need seeds to go back out into the world in order to create new crops. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? All right. So let's watch a video about this beautiful process. Come on, video. Hold on, young people. Let me get this together. All right. There we go.
What happened, Spiky? You look surprised.
Mrs. Coco, I visited this orchard a few weeks ago, and I remember that there were flowers growing here. Now there are fruits. What happened here?
Nothing's happened. It's just a natural process through which flowers turn into fruits.
That sounds amazing. Do flowers lay fruits like hens lay eggs?
No, Spiky. After fertilization, the ovary of a flower develops into a fruit.
What's fertilization?
Fertilization is the fusion of male and female gametes that occurs in the ovule of a flower. Fertilization takes place in 3 steps: the germination of pollen grains, zygote formation, and finally, embryo formation. Let's take a look at each step. The first step is the germination of pollen grains. After pollination, the pollen grains that are trapped by the stigma germinate. The pollen grows into a long pollen tube that extends down the style to enter the flower's ovary. Next, the nucleus of the pollen grain divides into 2 male gametes. Then, the pollen tube bursts and releases the male gametes inside the ovule. One of the male gamete fuses with a female gamete and forms a zygote. A zygote is a combination of a male and female gamete. The zygote divides many times before forming an embryo. An embryo is a baby plant that grows inside a seed. Finally, during the end of fertilization, the embryo is covered by a tough outer covering called a seed coat.
But it does not look like a fruit at all.
You're right, Spiky. After fertilization, several changes take place in a flower. For instance, the flower's sepals, petals, and stamens dry up and fall off. Then, the ovules, which contain the embryo, develop into a seed. The ovary grows bigger and ripens into a fruit. The skin of the fruit, or the pericarp, develops from the walls of the ovary. At this point, the flower completely becomes a fruit. Did you know many people think that tomatoes, brinjal, and cucumbers are vegetables, but they're actually fruits? Can you guess why? because they develop from the ovary of a flower and contain seeds. Did you know that almonds, walnuts, and pistachios are seeds? This is why they have a thick, dry, and tough seed coat. Likewise, peanuts, peas, and beans are edible seeds enclosed in pods. Almost all flowering plants produce fruits, but not all their fruits are edible, such as the fruit of a sunflower. Let's summarize. Fertilization is the fusion of male and female gametes. After fertilization, a zygote is formed, which grows bigger to form an embryo. Then, the flower undergoes several changes and the ovary develops into a fruit. As the ovary grows bigger, the ovules develop into seeds.
All right. That was very fruitful information. Very fruitful information. How many of you knew about the seeds, those nuts being seeds? So, now that we've talked about fertilization, let's talk a little bit about fertilizer. Now, fertilization is the process where it helps, right? It helps the beautiful, beautiful plant bring forth the seed in the ovary, producing fruit and new life. So, what is fertilizer? Because when you go to the store and they have fertilizer, and what is that stuff then? Does that help in the process of fertilization? Well, let's see. Fertilizer, fertilizer, excuse me, let's change that. Fertilizer, imagine that's fertilizer, is a chemical or natural substance added to soil or to land to increase its fertility, to create a more sacred or uh, healthy space for the plant to grow best. That is fertilizer. And they have chemical fertilizer and there's natural fertilizer. So now we're going to dig deeper, not all the way into it, because next week we're going to dig even deeper into like the components of fertilizer and why it helps make it grow. However, right now we're going to get a brief overview of fertilizer to get you excited for next week. Pay attention.
Put simply, fertilizer is plant food. It can be natural or deliberately put into soil by people. Fertilizer contains different kinds of nutrients that are essential for plants to grow. Ever since people started farming plants for food, thousands of years ago, they've had to manage the quality of soil on the land. When soil contains lots of essential nutrients, crop plants can grow fast and produce large yields. But when we harvest crops and then take them away and eat them, we take the nutrients too. So after years of growing plants, the soil can't support crops very well unless we replace the nutrients using fertilizer. Most fertilizers contain nitrogen and phosphorus, though some contain other useful elements like potassium. They can be organic or inorganic. Organic fertilizer contains carbon, and an example of an organic fertilizer is manure. Inorganic fertilizers can take many forms, such as ammonium phosphate, which can be in a crystal or a powdered form. Since we learned how to make fertilizers efficiently on a large scale, we've been able to grow many more crops, and therefore the human population has risen dramatically. There can be problems with putting too much fertilizer into a natural system, and some of the problems with fertilizers are explained in other videos. So, a fertilizer is a plant food that contains nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus, and we use it to grow our crops bigger and faster so they produce more food.
All right. So that is a sneak peek for next week's lesson. We're going to dig deep on the nitrogen and the phosphorus and the potassium and the manure and the compost and things like that. So we are getting even deeper in our lesson. We ain't even stressing, counting our blessings. And I'm so grateful to be able to have this platform with you all and to share the knowledge and to make sure that we are all learning together. So be on the lookout for your homework on Thursday. I'll see y'all virtually soon. Peace.